you through the day. But first, I would like to introduce our executive chairman and founder to share his introductory remarks. Please, Bruno Lieberberg.
Merci, thank you, Annika. And hello, everybody. Perhaps we could lower the volume a bit. Thank you. I'm very happy to introduce this very, very interesting event on data centers and the grid. As the co-authors of the report that we're going to learn about this afternoon, as they point out, data centers have become emblematic of the next policy frontier, where climate ambition, digital acceleration, economic resilience, and energy security intersect. It's now unanimously recognized that to support its competitiveness, Europe needs to build out its digital and AI capabilities, as well as the necessary underlying infrastructure. Yet, the European energy grid risks becoming a major bottleneck to Europe's future digital and AI ambitions. And the report that CERRE is publishing today addresses precisely that challenge. It discusses the opportunities around AI, the technical and regulatory hurdles, case studies from inside and outside Europe, and finally, it offers practical recommendations to support the system integration of data centers. For me, this report is also part, beyond the purely energy-related challenges, the report is also part of the current broader debate on Europe's competitiveness and digital sovereignty. We all agree that Europe's weakness in tech is intolerable. But what to do about it is much less clear. And in this case, the question is, where will the compute capability and energy come from? And I hear more and more policymakers, industrialists, and even some colleagues, some academics, think tankers, pushing for a so-called Eurostack. That is a comprehensive, if I understand well, a comprehensive set of fully European tech products across the whole digital supply chain. This is, ladies and gentlemen, a very ambitious agenda. And I think, however, that it's not a realistic one. Because, as was pointed out by Zach Meyers, the CERRE Director of Research, in a recent paper, and I think Zach is somewhere in the room because I saw him coming in, it's not realistic because this ignores economic, political, and technological realities. First, the 55 billion euro for digital leadership in the Competitiveness Fund just proposed by the Commission is very pale in comparison to the cost of building a European tech stack, which even its proponents estimate at 300 billion euros. Second, I doubt that many governments will be willing to artificially support the viability of European companies by altering procurement practices and walking away from WTO. We are not the USA. 80% of our trade is with the rest of the world. And I don't think that we're prepared to tamper with WTO rules. And third, the imperative of competitiveness requires us to diffuse existing technologies rapidly into European businesses. And it's a fact that in many parts of the digital supply chain, these technologies are not European. Therefore, I'm convinced that what Europe needs is a targeted digital policy, one that focuses on its strengths, where the EU already has leadership or where it is not yet too late to gain one. Think of the Dutch firm ASML, the global leader in lithographic machines, which do the very cutting-edge AI chips. And I could also mention the use of AI for industrial purposes, where firms such as Mistral could secure an enduring competitive advantage. And there are many more examples. So I think that Europe can no longer afford to repeat its past failures. Like, for instance, as was advocated by the previous commissioner for digital, the attempt to build 20% of the world chips, or to create an open cloud computing platform with too little money spread too thinly. So faced with external threats and aggressive economic policies from the US and China, Europe must leverage its strengths, not just try to eliminate its weaknesses, ensuring that we have robust, resilient electricity grids to power the growing park of data centers, and thereby support Europe's competitiveness and innovation. This is an absolute priority. I'm proud that thanks to its acknowledged expertise in digital and energy regulation and policy, CERRE has been able to cover in this new contribution published today the different dimensions of the data center challenge. Now, for those new to our think tank, let me just recall that our studies are written by leading academics and informed by extensive discussions with key stakeholders, including very often policymakers, and the Commission, not to mention it. This is, however, without prejudice to the fact that the drafting process is always performed in full independence, as enshrined in the bylaws of our think tank, and scrupulously, and sometimes with a big effort, protected by our management. For the completion of this specific project, we have benefited from the support, input, and data from a broad consortium of CERRE members, data centers operators, investors, energy utilities, and grid operators at both distribution and transmission levels, as well as telecom and energy regulators. And many of them are represented today, and I'm very pleased to greet them and to thank them for being present. So to conclude, ladies and gentlemen, I would like to thank the authors. They're represented by our brilliant Thomas Le Goff, and I'm confident that the presentation that we're going to hear in a minute will trigger what I hope will be exciting, stimulating, and thought-provoking discussions. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. I'd like to invite Thomas Le Goff to the stage to present the latest research. Thomas is one of the lead authors and a professor of law and technology at Paris Telecom.
So I don't have a zapper for the slide. I should say next slide. It's okay? Yeah? Okay, nice. Well, hello everyone. Thank you for being here. It is really my pleasure to be here in front of you to present you the results of a 6 months research effort with 3 colleagues and a lot of inputs from our consortium member. So the first question we had in mind is that why do we need to talk again about data centers now? So we can go to the next slide, please. The reason is, maybe like me, you've been drowned by news like these ones with announces of major data center projects, titans, data center projects around the world. I just gave a few examples. That's not to target anyone. And this major study by the International Energy Agency, which projects energy demand from AI to reach the level of energy consumption of Japan by 2030. So huge amounts of data center demand. We can go to the next slide. So we have this news, and at the same time, it puts quite a lot of stress on energy grids and poses a lot of environmental concerns, whether it is in the public or in policy spheres. I just gave again a few examples of some risk of power outage and electricity distortions in the US. We are not in the same situation. We don't have the same grid, but these are stuff that can happen when we do not manage our grid expansion quite well and have significant power that comes into the grid in such a short time. And then we have environmental concerns with a lot of new news articles and stuff revealed by the press on local environmental concerns rising from the build-outs of data centers. So it should also concern us, and that leads us to a lot of questions. But at the same time, and we can go to the next slide, please, data centers are drivers of economic competitiveness and can drive investment in Europe. We try to do a little projection of the DC investment and market size in the coming years, but all of these are highly uncertain, you will see, because there's a lot of uncertainties about the tech development. But it is true to say that we succeed in attracting foreign investment through the build-out of new data centers. And new data centers are also key for the building of an AI continent, like to make the European Union a leader in AI and to drive economic competitiveness. This is why data centers and computing infrastructures are mentioned in every new policies at the European Commission level, like the AI Continent Plan, or by a very influential report like the Draghi report. We can go to the next slide, please. And at the same time, it not only drives digital economic competitiveness, but also digital sovereignty. And here I try to summarize why data centers and having data centers on European soil have an interest in terms of digital sovereignty. First, because it guarantees our operational sovereignty, so the continuity of activity of our critical activities. That's the risks of other foreign powers plug off digital services. So having data centers on our soil protect us against that. At least it's one part of the solution. It's not the whole solution, but it is one component of the solution. And then you have data sovereignty. That is protecting European data against unlawful access to data from foreign powers. Again, having data centers on European soil is not the solution to all the problems. There are all other requirements, for example, having data centers in Europe but operated by actors that are subject to extraterritorial laws, then make the protection fall, but it is part of the solution, and we need to acknowledge that, and that's another reason to have data centers in Europe, and that's explained also the rise in demand. We can go to the next slide now. So basically, once we know all of that context, what are the problems that policymakers are facing? Well, there are several of them. We can go to the next slide, please. First, I talked to you about uncertainty. Uncertainty is everywhere on all the aspects of the problem. Tech developments are highly uncertain. We project a lot of things and a lot of increase in demand, for example, but we don't know what the future of AI will be. We don't know if more efficient and smaller models will become the norm and will be deployed everywhere, or if we will reach superintelligence through major models that require a huge amount of compute. A lot of uncertainty over every aspect of the problems. Efficiency gains are slowing. Why? Because they are plateauing towards a very good efficiency level. So we kind of cannot act anymore on this issue because we are reaching very good level of efficiency at the hardware level through technological advances. Then we have an issue about efficiency metrics, which we will come back on our policy recommendation. We have local issues of grid congestion that every countries in Europe are experiences. Not every, but a lot of European countries, that is a common issue, especially located in economic hub near capitals or major economic hub. And we have this common problem on how will we be able to cope with this new and increasing data center demand while we are already struggling to develop the grid to integrate renewable sources and so on. So a lot of questions, and now in this report we try to feed the discussion with some new insights. We do not intend to have and do not have the pretension to have the answers to all the questions, but at least we try to give quite new insights on the problem. So we can go to the next slide, please. So basically, what can we do about it? Next slide, please. What we did is we conducted a comparative analysis across several different countries in Europe and conducted case studies on each of these countries. We compared different aspects related, for example, to the regulation of connection rules, to the implementation of the Energy Efficiency Directive, to sustainability regulation at a national level, or diverging permitting processes in each of these countries. And we try to see what are the problems that each of these strategy poses, and to make from all of that emerge some findings that every country could learn from each other. So what are these findings? Next slide, please. Well, first findings are general findings, stuff that we found common in the different case studies that we conducted. The first one is that the policy in terms of data centers seems to follow recurring cycles, from incentives to developing to attract investment in data centers, to the emergence of a hub, which in turn leads to a congestion, which in the end leads to the need to review national policy and national regulation to remove the congestion in the grid, which in turn leads to the emergence of a new hubs, etc., etc. And we can map the different countries on where they are, and if they already did a turn, they can do another one if they created a new hub. And one good objective of a data center policy is to smooth the transition between these cycles. Because when we reach one of these steps, and for example, we have a local congestion and we did not anticipate what we could do to adapt regulation at this point, then we are forced to do a moratorium, and this is something we don't want because we lose a lot of money. Everyone is losing a lot of money when we are forced to have a moratorium. So one of our objectives would be to smooth the transition between all of these steps. Then we also saw that the regulatory priorities and the actions, policy and regulatory measures that every country is taking tackle different aspects of the problem, depending on the national context, but in the end, they face all the same problems. So there is a strong need to learn from each other so that countries that have adopted measures that didn't work in a country are not adopted in another one. And we have some examples that we could share in the following of the presentation. And finally, what we found also is that when different countries try to implement streamlining and fast tracking for data center, which is something we need, we'll see that in a minute. Basically, what we found is that we need to balance this with broader public interest. We need to reserve fast tracking to projects that have a significant benefits for the social interest, and there is no need to single out data center. We need objective criteria to assess the public interest of a project and to grant fast tracking based on these objective criteria, not saying all data centers should benefit from the fast tracking per se. Well, thank you. Can you get to the next slide? Aside general finding, we also found emerging concerns, stuff that do not really arise from the literature or not even from policy reports and so on. These are trends that we think could grow over time and could have impacts on data center operators or energy companies or policymakers. First, we see the rise of public contestation. This is a minor problem for now, but we experience more and more of these across different regions, which calls for more transparent communication about trade-offs, about what data centers bring to the public interest, why it is needed in terms of digital sovereignty, but also about the costs, so that we drive social acceptance upfront. Then we found debates over carbon accounting techniques used by tech companies. This is not a solved debate. This is an ongoing debate with evidence on one side, evidence on the other side, but we think that the debate is worth it, and we need to continue it and to conduct further research to define the best way to report on carbon accounting techniques, because the ones that are being used for now are seen sometimes as misleading or as allowing companies to hide environmental costs. And so this is not a good thing also for social acceptance and the acceptance of technology in the end also. And finally, we have an issue of implantation in water-scarce region, which is not something also that is new. And we also have new contestation in some regions in the world about this new issue, and with a lot of example in the press. I think that's something that should be taken into consideration, that maybe will be solved by new technologies that will use very less water for cooling data centers, but we think that it would be important to assess also this impact in the environmental impact assessment and integrate water stress criteria in such a procedure. Well then, can we go to the next slide, please? Then we deep diver in the analysis, and we reviewed we tried to identify and review all the European legislations that are applicable to data center activities. So we're not talking here about only environmental or energy regulations. We also looked at cybersecurity or tech regulation that apply to data centers. And what we found is that if you're a data center operator and that you are both subject to digital regulations and that you are operated in the energy market, you are subject to a lot of regulations that sometimes overlap, for example, in terms of reporting obligations. So that calls maybe for a simplification effort, for example, by giving a single window for reporting on some aspects to avoid the multiplication of reporting obligations to different entities. So this is not something we could reach final conclusions, we could not recommend specific provisions to remove, but we think this is an important issue that should be addressed in the AI Cloud and Development Plan and the AI Continent Plan more largely, like the fact that utilities can operate both regulated under digital regulation and market-based assets. And after that, it leads us to build a policy toolkit. Next slide, please. A policy toolkit for policymakers, but also for national regulators, the European Commission, where we try to map all the policy and regulatory measures that could address some of the problem. So we couldn't put all the details of all the policy measures, but it is in the report, and I really invite you to read it. We classify them between hard regulatory obligations and soft law, more information-based measures. And this way, policymakers can also pick and choose and conduct their own cost and benefit analysis based on all the measures that have been experimented in the past or are new and we can, that we propose also. So they go, like I said, from strict regulatory obligations like emissions caps and implementation of efficiency metrics to more informational, like publishing a heat map of grid congestion by energy regulators. Okay, so from the harder to the softer. Well then, this leads us to our policy recommendation. Next slide, please. We drafted 6 policy recommendations that are all derivated in sub-recommendations and that are all backed by development in the report. I won't go into the detail of every of them, but we'll try to show them a bit quickly. The first one is about fast-tracking data centers. It is an issue. Why? Because, as I said, data centers are drivers of economic competitiveness. We need it for becoming an AI leader and so on, and we are facing longer and longer delays every year. So it is true to say that we need to adopt simpler permitting processes and have harmonized efficiency standards. But we think, in order also to respect EU law and the non-discriminatory principle, that we should base this fast tracking on objective criteria and not by singling out DC, which is something that some countries have tried to do or are trying to implement in national legislation. So not only we consider that it might not be compliant with EU law, but also it is not evidence-backed, and it is not relevant to give priority for data centers just because they are data centers. If social housing projects like score much well on social utilities, the fast tracking should be also granted to the social housing project. So this is one of the main outcome of our analysis on that. And we also think that rigid rules wouldn't work on that matter. We need to think upfront the possibility of adaptiveness of the regulatory measures that we take, maybe by incorporating thresholds in the regulation so that we can review the criteria based on the experience and based on what is happening on the field. Our second recommendation is about efficiency metrics. So I'm not a technical expert, so I won't dive into much details on this one, but basically in the report there is a nice discussion about the different efficiency metrics that can be used to measure the efficiency of data centers, and there are large discussion on which should be the good one, and for now no consensus arises, but I think it is still an issue to reflect the more systemic impact and systemic efficiency of a data center rather than focusing on a very specific power usage efficiency metric, for example. But for now that's the best we have. Our third one, that's on the next slide please, is to do everything we can to make data center asset for the grid. Basically, one of our conclusions is that we need data centers in Europe, yes, but we need like good data centers that are at the maximum of possibility in terms of efficiency, but also in terms of flexibility potential, and we need to incentivize them to provide flexibility services through a lot of different options, which can go from adapted network tariffs, flexible connection agreements. We have a lot of options, but we need to make sure that at the time of the connection, we have the maximum positive impacts of the data center before to connect him, not coming after with a regulation. So incentivizing demand response mechanism, on-site storage capacity, and powering with clean energy, so renewable sources mainly. Then our fourth recommendation deals, if I remember well, can we go to the next slide please? Yeah, on grid expansion. That's and grid expansion planning. That's also maybe one of the main things that come out of our report, is that if we want data centers coming up in the grid to boost digital sovereignty, boost economic competitiveness, we need to invest on grid expansion. It is a challenge, but we need to do everything we can to boost grid expansion, investment in infrastructure, because at the end, that is what we will need to avoid the bottleneck, to avoid the grid congestion, and we need to take advantage of all the flexibility potential of data centers, not only at the operational level, like what I just mentioned, but also at the geographical level. Because all AI workload do not need to be located close to the to where the inference will be needed. So data centers that will be needed for AI training can be located in more remote areas where we have uncongested grids and affordable electricity in cooler climates, for example. So we need also to leverage this geographical flexibility of data center siting. Thank you. Can we go to the next slide? Yeah. Then we have an issue in terms of reporting, but it's kind of redundant with the issue of energy efficiency metrics. And I mentioned the flexible connection agreement, so I won't dive into it again. And our last recommendation on the last slide is on cooperation. Because I think one of the things that our reports show is that together we experience quite a lot of problems in terms of data centers, and every country have taken measures to try to tackle them. And I think by strengthening the coordination and cooperation between member states, but also between institutions, between regulators also, we can learn from the experience of each other. And again, coming back to the beginning of my speech, smooth the transitions between the different steps of the data center policy cycle. And I think it is key to have this sphere of communication, cooperation, and discussion, because there are a lot of unsolved problems that won't be solved just by commissioning new research on that. There are important and complicated trade-offs to be made, and this can be reached only through consensus and discussion. So I think it is very important to foster this kind of multi-stakeholder discussion to tackle these complex issues. And also to be adaptive, like to tackle new issues and to follow the technological evolution, because we won't be able to solve the problem for the next 20 years. Technology will evolve so fast that we need to foster this discussion on the long term to be able to evolve dynamically, I'd say. And that's also consistent with something that is advertised in other reports on dynamic regulation or flexible regulation, which is also published by CERRE in another report. Well, that's me. Thank you very much for your attention, and I'm looking forward for the discussion after.
Thomas, thanks so much. Lots to dissect for us now here in the room. Again, a warm welcome to everyone who joined us in the meantime, online and here in the room. I see it's a lot fuller now. So, you know, this discussion really goes to the heart of what CERRE does at the intersection of digital and energy. And I think we said it earlier, it's a new policy frontier that we have to grapple with. And I think we have large consensus. We need to build out AI and digital capabilities in Europe, but we need the infrastructure for it. Is this infrastructure, is the grid becoming the new battleground for tech companies? That's what we want to discuss now. We want to discuss how data center operators can interact best with the energy system. Let me just say that CERRE has started this work 5 years ago. We came out with a report then in 21, where we mapped out the digital the data center landscape as it looked then. Some things haven't changed. Iceland remains a big hub. We see it in the report again. Other things have changed dramatically with large language models entering the scene, and I think the Commission had different similar experiences with the AI strategy, and then large language models, cloud computing coming into the scene, and also industrial applications. And still we're only at the very beginning of what AI capabilities can bring. So we will see a growing energy demand. Thomas has also shown us how much the context has shifted for the discussion we have. We're discussing tech sovereignty, we're discussing citing and bringing, localizing data more in our region. And I'm glad that we're in an excellent position to cover this here. I just want to welcome our speakers because they largely represent also the consortium that informed, the consortium of stakeholders that informed CERRE's work on this report throughout the process. So we have grid operators at the transmission and at distribution levels, utilities, investors, data center operators, technology providers, and regulators, of course, from both the telco and the energy space that have really worked with us. So thank you all for coming here today. Before I now hand over to you, I would like to sense the atmosphere in the room. Do you feel, hands up, I mean, do you feel more that, you know, Europe has really an opportunity here, or are there actually too many barriers for AI in Europe? Hands up if you see it as an opportunity. And hands up who sees us more like barriers are bigger than the opportunities. Okay, there are a few, but I think the opportunities prevail, so let's turn to the opportunities. I would like to start with you, Dusan. Dusan Šrenek, you're the principal advisor at DG Klima. You have long-standing experience in both Slovak diplomacy, but also in the institutions, and interestingly, a background in both diplomacy and computer science. So, but please tell us a little bit about the opportunities that the Commission sees in AI, in the use of AI for climate action.
Thanks, Annika, and thanks a lot for the invitation and also for very insightful report. And I would like to react to words to Mr. Liebhaberg, highlighting that Europe has an opportunity in certain areas. And exactly, climate action I see as a huge opportunity for Europe to be a leader for AI for climate action. We are already leading on climate, and we have also, I think, good foundation to use huge data that we have. We have the best Earth observation system, Copernicus, Galileo navigation system, a lot of industrial data. So I think that we really can put everything together and also to use innovation that we have in Europe in clean tech. And there are many startups, small companies that are developing excellent solutions, but we are not so good in replicating and scaling up. So definitely AI for climate action is a huge opportunity. It's in decarbonization of key sectors like energy, industry, agriculture, buildings, transport. All in these areas we can profit from efficient use of AI. And even more, we can profit from AI on climate resilience. So really monitoring, using AI for weather modeling, for better forecasts, for better action on extreme weather events. Already we have some AI solutions on forest fires, floods, and also heat waves. So already there is a lot of work ongoing, and we would like to speed up and really to focus on replication and scaling up. As one example, I would mention cities. Cities already they are using many AI solutions like for example, smart city in Vienna or Rotterdam Harbor. They all need use AI for better energy efficiency, but also for solving problems like air pollution or greening of the cities. But many solutions, excellent solutions, developed by EU companies, EU scientists, they are used 1, 2 cities, but not scale up, not replicated in other cities. And I think that we can work much better on it and to use our existing initiatives. I would mention Destination Earth, that it's building digital twin of the Earth. And we are starting with digital twin on extreme weather and on adaptation. And also another initiative is European Digital Infrastructure Consortium Cityverse, focusing on local digital twins. So I think that if we put all together all excellent initiatives, all existing projects, applications, we can advance much faster. Maybe briefly on data centers, from our perspective, we see like 2 issues. Firstly, that we have enough of capacity for European competitiveness and sovereignty, and that's our colleagues in DG Connect are addressing and building, supporting new data centers. And at the same time, we need to look at the environmental footprint, what they are really causing, how much of emissions, energy consumption, water consumption, also material consumption. So, and of course, they are dangerous for disinformation, misinformation. So there are many also negative aspects, and we need to tackle it. Maybe one positive fact is that European data centers are quite clean. So absolute majority of energy comes from renewable energy and nuclear energy. So they are much cleaner than in other parts of the world.
Okay, very encouraging. And if I may paraphrase you, we hear that AI informs better policy making, measurement, impact measurement as well, and monitoring of climate policy at the various levels of intervention. Maybe turning to business, Christina Papastopoulou, you are working for PPC utility, and I think your company invests about 5 billion in a technology hub in northern Greece. Can you tell us a little bit more about the opportunity you see in AI?
Can you hear me? Okay, thank you very much. Well, before telling you a little bit more about this large investment, we need to understand our starting point as utility. The last 5 years, we have undergone into a profound transformation. If you consider our starting point, that our generation portfolio was heavily based in fossil fuels, and more specifically in lignite. And the last 5 years, we have undergone this transformation, and today our generation capacity, 50% of our generation capacity comes from renewable sources, a significant change compared to the past. And what is very important is that we are planning to shut down, to close our last lignite plant by next year. So at the same time, we are entering in 2 business segments, like e-mobility by developing charging networks and by developing telecoms, a big plan which is already developed nationwide by deploying fiber optics network. Okay, and why this is important related to our this investment? Because we are shifting, we are pre-profiling our company from traditional electricity utility company to a utility to a power tech company. So this brings us to our next step, which is this large investment of 5.75 billion for repurposing former lignite areas, and particularly in the Kozani region. And this is a 300 megawatt project that has a potential of scaling up to 1 gigawatt. It's a significant size for our region if we consider that the overall operational capacity of, at this moment, of data centers in Europe is slightly above 10 gigawatts. So it's important. And more important is also that this investment comes in an underserved area and less congested area compared to other parts of Europe. What drives this investment is the projected growth of the demand of AI and the massive computation power that this will bring together. And for us, by leveraging from our energy know-how, we can understand and we can find solutions like, for example, behind the meter solutions for clean, flexible generation to support the AI growth, while at the same time we ease the grid pressure, and also we ease the pressure to the bills to the prices going to the consumers. Another very important aspect of this investment is that this large investment for my country, at least, is going to be directed and addressed in a characterized region in transition. So it is important because we bring a new life to the region, we bring new green and tech jobs to the people. So which is part also for our overall strategy plan. And this has a great potential of creating positive impact in the society and the economy of the region.
Okay, thank you very much for showing us this new business opportunity that you see here in this field. Josh Parker, you're a lead sustainability at NVIDIA, non-European country. What business opportunity do you see as a global chip provider and provider of AI technology? What opportunities do you see in investments in Europe?
I think from our perspective, Europe has some key advantages and some hurdles as well that are unique to the region. First, there is deep technical expertise, I think, in Europe that will help drive capitalization of this new technology. I just came from Berlin, actually, this morning, where I was talking to policymakers about unique advantages in industry, in automation, and we've already been talking about expertise and unique data in Europe about climate and climate tech. You have more experience than most of the world in integrating renewables into your grid. And managing emissions. So those clean technologies, I think, are key opportunities in AI. And then just the energy grid itself. You have more experience again with clean energy. And as we look to the evolution of the grid and the modernization that is partly enabled by AI, trying to manage virtual power plants, having variable supply and variable demand with more batteries and more dispersed power generation, that's a huge challenge that AI can help solve. And I think Europe is actually positioned better than most of the world to take advantage of those features. So huge opportunities for, I think, as Bruno, you were suggesting, for Europe to have a key, unique role in the tech ecosystem where it can maximize value, and not that Europe necessarily needs to recreate the entire tech stack. Hopefully, we want to participate, to offer to all the businesses throughout Europe the technology, the foundation to try to help build AI that is aligned with the European goals, European values, including sustainability and digital sovereignty and so forth. So I think there is huge opportunity here. The challenges, of course, are potential regulatory hurdles and availability and cost of energy. So, of course, things that we're talking about today and things that, in general, you know, we tend to agree with the policy conclusions in the CERRE report. Streamlining regulations, making sure that the grid is expanding, and that we have opportunities to leverage the technology to help solve some of the challenges that we're concerned about with the technology. So great opportunities.
Thanks, George. We will come back to the barriers for sure, but it goes down like honey to hear how well-placed Europe actually is in terms of clean tech investments. No? I mean, yes, I see the Commission nodding. So let's turn to Wissam Anastas. You manage a private equity firm, and you are specialized on energy and energy infrastructure, real assets, as you call it in finance, data centers across Europe. The EU has come up with this concept of AI gigafactories, so large-scale clusters for AI. What does it solve for, and is this a new strategic asset class?
Thank you, Annika. Thank you, everyone, for receiving us. Yeah, we're effectively basically positioned to develop data center projects, as well as coming with a background of energy. So we understand energy, we understand data centers development. So we've been, just to touch on Thomas' presentation, we've been really at the principles of thinking about how you solve for energy together with data center development at the same time. That's where we come from. Now, AI gigafactories, the way that the Commission has basically presented it, but it's all work in progress, so it's not necessarily definitive as we know it. I mean, the 100,000 GPUs is quite a big goal. I think that there's a huge adaptation time from the market, the SMEs, the real users of AI. Who are the users of AI? It's basically all the big companies that we're part of, whether it's Siemens, whether it's Dutch Telecom, whether it's Orange, whether it's their client, all the SMEs, you know, they represent approximately 70% of the GDP of Europe, and these people are in the end the users of AI in a certain form or shape, right, with applications that still need to be developed, right? So this is where we are. So the adoption time of the clients, the end clients, is yet to be proven. So there's not too many GPU operators today in Europe. There's a few, you can count them in a hand, that operate 5, 10, 15,000 GPUs. And it's a time that will actually come to reach basically that large objective. I think that one point that we need to stress that haven't been spoken about yet is universities. The AI factories today are operational in several parts of Europe, and we have to leverage and work with them because they're actually at the depth of the understanding of what is needed in terms of engineering and end applications. There's one sector that you haven't mentioned, is the healthcare. Healthcare is huge as well. So we need to actually just all of us embark into that to see how far we can go. 100,000 GPUs seems amazingly large today. Maybe in 3 years it will be just, you know, not enough. So that's the putting things in perspective. It just needs to, we need to adopt with the demand, basically.
Yeah, thank you, Wissam, for pointing out how much there still is to come. I'm turning now to Oliver Franz, who is head of regulatory affairs at E.ON and has experience, I think, in both the energy, the grids, and also the broadband sector. You also teach regulatory economics and energy economics at university. But tell us today, as a DSO, you're dealing with that new actor on the block, the data center operators, and what opportunities do you see there?
Well, maybe first of all, to put things into a bit of perspective, maybe why are we as a DSO even concerned? Because in most countries that we operate in, and there are several in Europe that we run grids, we are running the high voltage grid. And considering the sizes of data centers that we look at right now, double digit to hundreds of megawatts, that is probably connecting to the high voltage grid. And this is then also why we are, we see these demands suddenly. We could have expected them maybe better, but now they are there. Having said that, as a DSO, first and foremost, I'm happy if my product is demanded. So there is somebody who needs connection, who needs capacity. That is something that makes us, generally speaking, happy. The same goes, and I believe that's where Thomas was absolutely right in his remarks, the same goes for charge point operators, the same goes for other kind of industrial electrification, and. And therefore we have to treat everybody in a way that is free of discrimination. I had a boss once who said we are allowed to treat everybody as badly. And of course we're trying to do it in a friendly way. And now here comes the opportunity question. One of the things that we must be aware of, I believe, is that capacity de facto now is a scarce resource throughout Europe, or it is increasingly becoming a scarce resource. As an economist, my absolute initial reaction to that is, if it is scarce, it should have a price increasingly. And I know all the counter arguments. I know that people are saying, yeah, but what about the hospitals? What about the kindergartens? What about the other things? Yes, we need to find solutions to that, but to ignore the fact that there is value created by the sheer fact that a lot of land has an electricity connection granted, compared to another lot that hasn't, is, I believe, at least very short-sighted. And then what we are actually doing is, what we are talking, of course, to the data centers, as I should believe that mostly we're talking about let's say a production size that is n equals 1. So every single one is different again, even if it's from the same company, whatever. We already know that we must come with the grid from the west, so they change their layout and so on. It's always very individual. And what we also see, and this is, I'm very happy that that made it into the report, that the demand that we are shown and that we are asked for is much bigger than what is utilized at the beginning. And whilst we go towards those GPUs that you were mentioning, we probably need to find a way to sensibly play with that. Because I can already offer somebody else to connect him, especially if I have a vision or a plan in order to provide additional capacity, let's say in 3 years' time. Because if I know that the others will not use their full capacity, then I have a chance of doing something and giving somebody a vision for themselves to go ahead. And this is what we're using extensively right now. And then maybe to say one more word, and I believe that that's also, I believe, part of the reality that Europe must face. We have a lot of speculation in every part of the demand for connections, and somehow we must find a way to bring order to the queue, if I may say it like that. And for one reason especially, right now the information that I get from looking at my connection request is absolutely worthless. Because there's so much speculation in there that in the end you can throw the dice and question yourself, okay, what am I planning for? And we must come back to a situation, I believe, where the queue and the information that is contained in the queue has a very clear connection to the planning that we do and to the capacity provision going forward. And we're not at that, and a reason for that, but I believe we come to that point later, is actually first come, first serve.
We will come back to that. Thank you for making this problem statement for our next thematic block, which is the grid, which is already strained, which now meets long connection queues, a very uncertain electricity demand, very difficult to estimate for a variety of factors, and that's also, I invite you to look at the report because it's explained in more detail there. I'd love to turn to you, Vera Brenzel. You had public affairs and communications at TenneT, also have long-standing experience in the Commission. You're electric and in an energy utility, so you've seen the very different stakeholders, I think, also. Can you tell us a little bit how you experience this new development from the transmission grid perspective? Maybe also explain a little bit, I've heard your CEO also alluding to a change of load profiles, a change of demand in the grid due to AI. So are we working in a new world? What's happening? There's
Thank you, Annika, and thank you for also hosting this debate, which is, I think, quite timely. Yeah, well, the grid, I can only speak for, you know, we're always throwing numbers here, and it's like kind of, it causes drowsiness if you hear all these numbers. But we are tripling our asset base within 5 years, which is a lot. We intend to invest 65 billion, which is, I think, quite a big figure, even for a country like Germany. But still, our connection queue management is not really improving. So, I mean, apart from basically cleaning up the queue, I do think that we should look at AI from 3 different points of view, because the grid congestions will remain. I mean, it's the logic of the transition. There will be one scarcity, and it's the grid. Even if you build it, you will no longer be able to hold the copper plate. So not holding the copper plate will mean that we will need incentives to localize, or for locational signals to all participants. And second of all, we need the demand to be a bit more smart. And I think the easiest to connect demand, because we have a digitization problem. We do not know what e-car or e-mobility is charging where. And that is not going to be solved. But I think any AI data center being connected is totally digital, I would say, and is also a demand response that you can manage very nicely. So I think that is one thing. The second thing is, yeah, you can twin it up with renewables, so you can solve you can relieve the grid congestions. And I think the third element where AI comes into play is that we always claim that a good infrastructure is the backbone of growth for an industry, for a country, for an economy. It brings prosperity. Now AI is something, or I'd say AI data centers. I think any data centers, cloud computing, are good as well, and they are also very flexible. But the AI data centers are the next level, and I think they bring somehow more concrete benefits to the industry. And we have a very large Mittelstand in Germany, and there are extreme big transaction costs that can, efficiency gains that you can bring into the system. So I think a country like Germany with a very strong industrial base, but somehow analogous in its processes, I think this is a very, very, very big booster. So to cut long story short, grids will remain a bottleneck. It's not something that you can solve, because that's the logic of the energy transition to wheel long-haul, renewable electrons across Europe, and that's the good beauty of Europe as well, that we speak one language for electricity from Portugal to Ukraine, from Stavanger to Greece. So it's, I think it's great. So bottlenecks will remain. AI is a booster trifold. It's relieves the grids. It is immediately connectable as a demand response, and you can really use it to optimize the system. And the third thing is that it is a real industry booster, economic booster.
Thanks very much. That was the German and Dutch perspective. And turning to Italy, because we have another transmission grid operator, Terna, here, Mauro Caprabianca, you're the head of efficient regional planning. I'd love to hear what you do in that function, and also ask you how you deal with the AI challenge in Italy, and if you have perhaps also found other responses.
Thank you, Annika. So, Efficient Regional Planning is a new organization that was created in Terna, Italian TSO, more or less 1 year ago, with the ambitious objective to improve connection process in all its parts. So, both from the technical point of view and from the interaction with the stakeholder point of view, especially not only operators, but also institutions at the national and regional level that are probably a very important stakeholder in this process. Coming from your question, so from TSO point of view, as already stated before, both in the report from previous speech, so the main challenge is the need to accommodate very large load that concentrated in a restricted piece of land, and that often, without knowing in advance how big they will be and how many of them will really be realized. That is both from AI and data center, obviously, is quite the same. And from this point of view, uncertainty is the biggest challenge. What makes this even more complex is that this demand typically came from area with an already high demand, and often from densely populated areas where building new infrastructure is not only technically difficult, but is also strongly so resisted from local communities and sometimes also from local institutions. In Italy, at the moment, we have more than 55 gigawatts of connection demand from connection requests from data centers, and 80% of that is in the northern area of the country, and more than 15 gigawatts are in the area, in the metropolitan area of Milan. So a very concentrated demand. And, but we don't know exactly how many of these gigawatts, probably only a very small part will be realized in 2030. And so it's very difficult to plan infrastructure in the right way. From a technical standpoint, our focus is in designing and developing modular solution, modular connection that could start with a minimum viable setup that is able to accommodate the first data center that will be realized, and then it could be scaled up in case new data center will come online and demand will grow. But obviously, this is needed in order to avoid to waste money, obviously, but also time for the operators, because it's different to build a very big infrastructure. It needs much more time, while modular solution could arrive earlier, and this together with temporary flexible connection, that is also an issue also at the European level. So to improve to introduce flexible connection, that is in part already a reality for temporary connection in Italy. It's two kind of instruments that are really useful to provide the services that are needed from data center operators in the right time without too much delay respect to their expectation.
Yeah, Mauro, thank you very much. I mean, I think it came out, they're very, and you see it in the report, they're very different types of data centers, very different demand profiles, and also there are large connection queues. We heard also from Olli that the capacity is not always used fully. So turning to the user, actually, Willem van den Berg, you're the head of public policy of Equinix. You have data centers in, I think, 260 countries. Can you tell us a little bit about your engagement in Europe, and have such bottlenecks in Europe actually already made you shift your investment plans?
Thank you, Annika, and good to be here. So, yeah, Equinix is the world's digital infrastructure company. We are a co-location data center company, which means that we operate the buildings, but we rent out space and power to our customers who set up their own IT in our facilities. So we have over 270 data centers globally, over 10,000 customers, and in the EU we are in 11 member states. So talking about grids and congestion and the choices for where we go. So we go to where our customers want us to go. And I think that's reflected in the fact that there are data center hotspots in Europe, which are the big metros. So this has technical and commercial reasons behind it. Equinix specializes in low latency and interconnection dense ecosystems within our data centers. So for things like AI inference, which Thomas mentioned in his report, the most value will be when we're located near urban areas where latency is lowest and the end user demand is the highest. So we believe that this should inform energy policy and grid planning. Data centers are not all the same, which was just mentioned by the two of you. Some of these data centers need to be close to end users, while others might be more location agnostic. So ideally, this would be reflected in policy. Having said that, obviously today grid connection delays are regularly extending project timelines by years, increasing costs and slowing development. So as an industry, we're seeing more of a focus on access to power in our investment decisions than the more traditional kind of priorities like latency, fiber, or land, although those three do still remain important. So as a result of this, you're seeing a lot of tier 2 markets outside of the traditional hubs heating up. And if any of you have been frequenting data center conferences the last couple of years, you'll notice that the types of cities and locations that are mentioned are changing because of this.
Thank you, and maybe just to your right again to Wissam, you also, and sorry, not of course, obviously not 260 countries, 260 data centers, but Wissam, you are investing across Europe also. What pains you most when you have to deal across borders and invest?
Well, we're I would say much smaller, obviously, than Equinix, and much more. I'm not going to say nimble, but we're trying to be local and understand the local issues, as in the local landowners, the local municipalities. We try to, we're focused on just a few compared to them, and we're yeah. I mean, I think. So what is exactly the question that you wanted me to ask to answer? Sorry.
I was just wondering, since you have good experience in investing across Europe, if perhaps there are also best practices or there are things that work better than other approaches.
Not necessarily. I mean, I think. Yeah. I mean, in terms of locations, you have effectively. I mean, the big metros where everybody wants to be, and this is why it's more complicated to get power. And this is where it's more complicated to get the sites, because you have to work with the landowners and with the municipalities and with the neighbors and with all of it, which makes it complicated on these specific locations. If you go outside for I don't know, a training data center or an LLM or inference data centers, AI data centers, you can go somewhere else that is not necessarily a tier 1 city, tier 2 or tier 3, as we've seen in the press quite recently. But we're not too much focused on those, I have to admit. So we're hyperscaler focused on the major cities. That's where we are. But yeah, I mean, all the issues that were mentioned with respect to our dealings with the grid, the TSOs or DNOs, depending on who it is that we face in that specific site, the way we approach it is we approach them as being our partners, because we understand where they come from. They need to project and plan their demand, and their, how much power are we going to commit to take by when? And this is where the circularity is. We need to be able to plan for what demand is, for them to basically be able to take our request for a certain capacity quite seriously. So if it's in a city that is quite well known, with demand is quite well known, because then clients are quite know actually what the market is, then it's easy. If you go to another city, then that tier 2, tier 3 city, or another place in the middle of nowhere, then it becomes more complicated. So in terms of a policy, what actually leads me to think is, what it is, where are the existing sites where you have power, where you basically can either leapfrog and build an ecosystem around it, maybe by maybe there's a natural element of a university coming in place, or there's a place that needs to be revived in a country, and then you just basically, instead of wanting necessarily Tenet to raise I don't know how many billions you raised last week, but massive, you say, why don't we just play with the TSOs and DNOs as partners to see how we can help them solve their problem and yet meet our demand. So we have a really partnership approach with the utilities and the TSOs and DNOs.
Okay, but so you're finding very different conditions according to where you are.
Yeah, 100%.
And maybe turning to Stavros Stamatokos from DG ENA, you work in the AI and digitalization unit. You're preparing an AI and energy roadmap. Can you tell us a little bit more about your plans here?
Sure. Thanks a lot, Annika, and thanks for hosting this. So our commissioner has been tasked to develop a strategic roadmap for digitalization and use of AI in the energy system. And I almost envy my colleague Dusan and other colleagues from the Commission that they're looking at how AI can help digitalize and accelerate their sectors. But in the energy sector, we are also the demand, on the demand side. So AI lives on energy, and so we have to tackle both the opportunities but also the challenges. So on the opportunity side, I very quickly can say that, and I echo Josie's message, and thanks for that, that we have a vibrant ecosystem of companies, especially on the management of grids, that they develop products worldwide, and there we have a very good collaboration mentality in Europe, and our products are top-notch, and I think we have an opportunity to play there if we embrace AI fast enough. But looking on the demand side, I can tell you that the discussion is very, also at political level, is coming up again and again. Thus, we are moving forward to take some action on how to integrate grids in the European energy system in a sustainable way. And I can explain a bit on our process up to now. So we have a number of workshops already with the industry. So we're trying to bring together the tech industry to talk to the energy sector. I believe it's quite unique, it's quite new in Europe. We are aware that this is an ongoing process at a national level in many member states, but at European level, it's the first time that we try to bring these sectors together to understand each other's needs and work together towards this objective that we have to triple the data center capacity in Europe in the next 5 years. So I'm happy to hear the sixth recommendation from Thomas about enhancing this collaboration between these two sectors. So our objective is to structure this discussion and possibly come to certain commitments by both sectors, how to streamline the connection process, how data centers can be early involved in the strategic and scenario planning of grids, and obviously looking at the other side, how data centers can become active assets of the grid. We will heavily focus on flexibility. We really need to leverage the data centers, the potential for flexibility. I was positively surprised to read these numbers of 50 to 60 gigawatts of flexibility. I think that was the figure for 35, which is impressive. And we would really need to understand which are the right flexibility products that data centers can participate, and what are the right incentives for the data centers to do so. So this is an ongoing discussion. The objective is to bring it further as much as possible with potential commitments, indicators, and bring this, ultimately bring these sectors together for mutual understanding and mutual benefit.
Yeah, indeed, Stavros, the authors point out that about 50 or 60 gigawatt of demand-side flexibility potential by 35 could be leveraged through data centers. Let's talk a bit about this, but I first want to also say that as part of what's coming in the autumn from DG ENA, there is a guidance on grid connections. And Olli, we spoke about it earlier. Vera, you might want to come in. I think we've heard earlier, like, non-discriminatory access is non-negotiable in Europe, but are there other principles that could be touched on to make it easier?
That's a very good one, thank you. Pardon. So first of all, we are happy, of course, that the Commission is looking at the issue and that we are going to have a guidance. I would have a certain question mark, though, whether the guidance alone will do it, because the problem is rather huge. And I mentioned the word speculation. I'll say it again. There is a lot of speculation going on, which, by the way, is individually rational. So these guys aren't bad or anything. They're just doing their jobs. But it leads them to do stuff that, in a system perspective, is not efficient. And therefore, we must move in a way that gives them incentives to behave more efficient. If you want, we need to build a giant Groves-Clark truth-telling mechanism, which would be an auction in the end, and so on. Not proposing that as a solution, just saying that there are ideas in economics how to do that. And I also feel, and I know, of course, that the Commission is really looking at things that can be done easily, and that are also doable in the small amount of time that is left until November. But I believe we have, with the grid package and the guidance, if you want, once in 5 to 10 years chance to really move something. And if, especially on the connections, we don't, I believe we can meet back in 3 years' time and have a very similar discussion. So I believe certain member states, probably more than others, and I'm not going to name names, but there is probably a push needed from Brussels to make people overcome first come, first serve. And Vera is my my testimonial here, if you want. There are member states who tried to change that and gave a lot of responsibility to the grid operators, which in the end didn't really work because now everybody is in court. So what a grid operator is able to do is they're able to follow a rule. So for instance, if the rule says, if you're in the queue for 2 years and you show absolutely no progress, then you're either taken off the queue or you're pushed to its end, or whatever the rule is, then we can follow that rule. If we really have to go into the project and understand whether or not they're ready to go, I know that lots of people are actually very happy about what was done in the UK, just one grid operator, not many, and so on. That becomes complicated. So I believe there's a chance. I hope the Commission will use it, maybe in doing more than just guiding. And we ought to be doing it because we must somehow give the correct incentives to those people who are asking capacity from us. And just to give you an idea, because these numbers always sound so, how should I say, strange or big. So we have, just as E.ON in Germany, about 50 gigawatts of data centers that are applying and somewhere in the queue. We actually will do 5 for sure, and we will do another 10 in storage, probably. Which means that we find 15 gigawatts somewhere in an already congested system, in a country, again, that has a peak load of 80. And there is maybe another secret, I'm not sure, but another option that we really need to discuss, and that is whether people and parties that have been on the grid for a very long time are actually using what is booked for them in our systems. So to really go back to existing customers and ask them, my system says 50, you have been using 35 forever, are you sure that these other 15 can't be used in any other way? Today we just can ask them friendlily. Maybe, again, a bit more pushiness might be needed, and pushiness can again be process, and it can again be economics, if you want. And then maybe Vera wants to add something.
Yeah, I think it's a very good point. I couldn't agree more. But I would like to touch upon a fundamental question. We see, starting with the Draghi report, that there is, a full completion of the European internal energy market is still missing. Now, where the European Commission could really mark or set a sort of, mark a signal, is by really trying to standardize, because these are competitive, locational factors. Standardize, what is a connection queue management? How do you deal? How do you prioritize? How do you access? Who do you give access to? From a system point of view, from an economic point of view, and in the end, also from I would say from a commitment point of view, because we do have, I'd say 90% are zombie requests. Now, first of all, it's a sort of thing that is, I think it's an instrument, or it's a lever to really make Europe interesting at all locations, and not only at those who have the most favorable, I'd say, loopholes. The second thing is that why guidance? A guidance has basically, it's nice, but it's not enough. I think these are the elements to really design the future market model, because we will no longer function in a copper plate. And if we continue by using the network codes of the past for a system of the future, we will go wrong. This is not going to, we will end up in quite a dilemma. The second thing is that we are crowding out a lot of welfare, because there is, as you say, secondary markets. In the Netherlands, we had auctions and a lot of money being earned. And as you say, they're doing their job, but it's because we have a loophole. We need to use if you want to auction, the money that comes from the auctioning has to go back into the system, because we all complain about high energy prices. But in the end, we have a lot of crowding out of money. That is for data centers, but that's also for battery storage, because the grid access are basically is the big benefit today in such a scarcity, where you do not have enough grid access capacity. And I think the third element is, if every country does its own way, we can build interconnectors, and we can try to govern more from a European point of view. But it's not going to complete the internal energy market. So I really have a strong pledge to the European Commission: get your act together and just put it into a decent piece of legislation, because that's where we have to go.
I feel there might want to be some reactions from the round. Do you want to come in as well? Or other grid operators? Not for now. Okay, then let's maybe move on to the role of data centers as assets for the grid. There were some proposals in the report, around flexible connection agreements, around the co-location with batteries, and I think the report also shows very nicely how regulation in some member states has already been adapted and really unlocked some new potential in the market. Willem, would you like to come in on that topic and explain a bit what opportunities there are?
Yeah, thank you, Annika. I'll start by saying that there's a lot in the report, and that's just been mentioned in terms of the congestion, that we think are very helpful suggestions. So there's a lot of low-hanging fruit in terms of information sharing between data centers, grid operators, NSOE, EU member states, and the like on load forecasting, improving that. We also agree with the comments around, basically the zombie applications and the speculation. I think there's a pretty broad consensus that we would like to get the speculation out of the queues collectively. You mentioned the UK, Oliver, moving from first in to first served to first ready, first served. I think that's something that the EU could look at as well. Then, issues around fair queuing frameworks for reforms, permitting for transmissions, we know is a big issue. Moving on to demand-side flexibility for data centers. This is something that's quite complex, because at the moment, demand-side flexibility for data centers essentially means that we use backup diesel generators, which nobody wants to do in Europe. It undermines the European Green Deal goals, and is also severely limited by current environmental regulations. So I think it's also important to note that in addition to the sustainability side of flexible demand, data centers are also increasingly being classified as critical national infrastructure under a variety of EU and member state laws, and it was great to see that in the report as well. So think of NIS2, DORA, the Critical Entities Resilience Directive. So Equinix's customers are companies like hospitals, banks, government agencies, and the like, and we're very proud of our 6 nines of uptime, so 99.9999% uptime. That's really core to what we do and who we are, and extremely important to our customers. So we host mission-critical applications across the EU that cannot afford any downtime, and that's how we've traditionally been set up to run. So any conversation around flexibility, we think, really needs to think through the sustainability issue on one side, and then kind of the uptime 24/7 issue on the other hand.
It again shows that you're very specific users again, and cannot cannot be treated in the same way, even if I think the authors said don't treat it like, don't find regulation just for data centers, find criteria that apply to the different users. Josh, you also I think are working on projects to address this issue. Could you expand a bit?
Yeah, so agree the issue of demand response in data centers is a complex one. It's one, though, that we have some exciting recent news about to help manage that will avoid the kind of diesel operation issue. Some of you may be familiar with the Norris study out of Duke University about, this is focused on the United States, but it talks about how just a little bit of flexibility for 100 hours or less per year, if we can ramp back data centers by just 25%, so that they're operating at 75% of their typical power envelope, that would unlock 100 gigawatts of energy in the United States. So similar to the 50 or 60 that we're talking about here. And we actually have a partner, NVIDIA has a partner called Emerald AI that has come up with a technical solution to this. They've got a proof of concept. They actually have a pilot program with National Grid in the UK where they're doing exactly that. They're able to take this complex problem of, we've got peak load in a particular region. If we ramp back our data center a little bit, then we're basically going to be able to bring more data centers online and make better use of the unutilized energy that's already in the system, because we're always planning for peak, planning for worst case scenario. And that allows us to be more efficient with the resources that we already have. And it allows, critically, data centers to come online faster because they're able to get access to energy that is in short supply right now. So that's one way in which, hopefully, data centers can end up being grid assets, being good neighbors, good citizens in the ecosystem in Europe. And while I'm on this topic, I would like to offer just a little bit of additional insight on how AI can end up being an asset generally. We haven't talked a lot about energy efficiency yet, and kind of the role of energy efficiency in this equation. I would update some of the analysis, I think, in the report with some recent data that we have on energy efficiency. Just in the past 2 years, we've improved the energy efficiency for inference workloads by 25 times. So it's a 96% reduction in energy for the same inference workload in just 2 years, so in one generation of our product. And that type of efficiency innovation has been very consistent over the past 10 years. And if you look specifically at hardware, then you see, as the report mentioned, that the hardware gains may be slowing in terms of efficiency, but if you look across the stack, that's where we see ongoing, very, very dramatic improvements in energy efficiency. So we don't think energy efficiency is dead or plateauing. It is very strong, and ultimately it ends up being less of an issue if you look at more broadly, why would we care about energy efficiency? And I think the answer to that is, we care about energy efficiency because, number one, it helps us with planning for how much energy we need. And number two, because we ultimately care about sustainability, and we want to make sure that we're managing resources effectively and not using more energy or emitting more carbon than we need to. And on the first side, planning, absolutely valid, but the energy efficiency is just one variable in the equation. What we really need to look at is overall demand. How much are we able to build out data centers? Those kind of top-down metrics are a lot easier than trying to factor in all the variables like energy efficiency and forecast that way. So looking at how much can we build is a better proxy for how much we will energy AI will use over the long term. And personally, I'm very optimistic that in the near term, because of the cross-sectoral improvements in energy efficiency in manufacturing, in buildings, in transportation, that AI will end up being a net contributor to energy and a net reduction in emissions, and more reports are coming to that same conclusion. So I think there's the opportunity here for AI to be a very powerful public good, and that's another reason why I think on the regulatory side, because the market is already driving very, very dramatic improvements in energy efficiency, and our CEO actually has said that performance per watt is our metric of success. That the energy efficiency is already factored in, and that's driving, I think, this good corporate citizenship, good kind of public good that AI is hopefully going to deliver.
Thank you, Josh, for bridging now into this last aspect I really wanted to discuss with you before we also open up to the audience, which is the environmental footprint, of course, of the data centers, and which is, I think, the aspect that's most discussed in American media. I have the impression we discuss a lot the grid, but I think in the US you often read about the water and the resource use, the efficiency of the assets. Now, Dushan, I'd like to come back to you. What are the risks you see in terms of resource use associated with data centers?
There are many risks. Energy is one thing, but that there is progress, that we see that the really efficiency is increasing. But there are many others like water consumption, also like cooling. So there are also F-gases that they are very negative for climate, very strong greenhouse gases. And for material, there are bigger and bigger data centers, and of course they need more and more material. So like physical material, like cement, and also electronics. So, and for future, like also recycling is a problem. So definitely there is a growing consumption in different areas, and it's difficult to calculate footprint, carbon footprint, and also we don't know how AI is acting on our consumption. So like in other areas, so there is this rebound effect that we are using more AI, therefore we are using services, we are buying more. So definitely it's unclear exactly the impact. To calculate carbon footprint is extremely difficult. So we are more like pushing for sustainability, do more research, really to go for energy efficiency, less material use, and also heating, so like to use excess heating for heating in towns. So definitely like to do complex work, and in order to decrease environmental footprint. So that's what we are working, pushing. Our colleagues in Director General for Energy, they are working on the energy side. Other colleagues on environmental impact on water, and we are running several studies how to improve also AI efficiency, so learning algorithms, and so there are many aspects of global environmental impact of AI and data centers, and we need to address it. But I'm also quite optimistic. I think that that companies can manage it, and maybe this current assessment, what we will need in terms for energy consumption in 10 years, I hope it's maybe exaggerated, but that I don't know.
Then I turn maybe to business, and again, Christina, how do you ensure sustainable growth, and given that you're operating in higher temperatures, what are your answers to that?
Okay, this is a fair question. First of all, we need to acknowledge the need of the development of the growth of data centers across Europe, even though some regions, some different countries and regions in Europe are benefiting from more favorable climate because there are cooler places than in Greece in particular. That is why performance standards need to take in energy, in water use, in heat waste reuse need to take into account the differences, the regional differences and the regional specificities in terms of climate, in terms of climate, in terms of water management, and in terms also of heat waste reuse potential. And this will lead to responsible investments in data centers. It's not, and also it is as the new wave of the data centers, as Thomas also said in the report before, it's expected to use less, probably water. It will be more efficient, consuming less, having less water needs, let's say, for their operation. We expect, from one side, from the evolution of the technology, and from the other side, of assessing the best potential sustainable and innovative solutions to address these issues. We believe that this is something, but performance standards is taking the difference in specificities of its region is very important in this process.
Who wants to come in on the performance standards? I see Willem. I suppose, okay.
Yeah, I would just like to second all of those points that you just made. So Equinix has been actively engaged with the EED reporting scheme, the setup of that. We're looking forward to the labeling/rating scheme, and also we'll see the minimum performance standards come out. But just climate's very important across Europe, and again, there's no one-size-fits-all for data centers. So the most sustainable data center design for a cold climate where there's an abundance of non-potable water will be very different than a warm climate with water scarcity. And also what you mentioned about heat reuse. So Equinix is very proud to be heating the Paris Olympic pool from our PA10 data center, but there are also locations that don't have heat grids and don't have heat off-takers, so we might offer our heat for free, but nobody's interested in it. So again, sustainability just really needs to take these considerations into account, these differences.
Thanks. I think the report is also arguing for wider notion of rating. Talking about the energy efficiency package that's upcoming, Stavros, do you want to react?
Well, yes, I can, Annika, thanks. Which is nothing new, actually. It's a package of different activities around about the energy efficiency of data centers that we've been running over the past months. So it's coming in early next year together with a strategic roadmap for digitalization and AI. It's called Data Center Energy Efficiency Package. And probably the most interesting of what will be the package is a report from our reporting scheme. We published this summer a preliminary report from the data that have been reported so far. They represent more or less 1/3 of eligible data centers that are expected to report. And we have some interesting insights, and the final report will come early next year. As part of the package. This will give a good indication where we are in the sense of how many data centers we have in Europe, which was still unknown. It was just based on modeling and calculations, how much they consume in terms of energy, water, what is the share of renewable energy in their electricity mix, and how much waste heat is given back to local district heating networks. A second deliverable of this package is the rating scheme that has been consulted with stakeholders over the past year or so. It's the objective is to make it as efficient as possible, so possibly an automated labeling based on the reported data that is calculated automatically without bringing extra obligations, either on the member states or on the companies to go into a certification phase. And then another interesting deliverable that comes with the package is an opening of the discussion of the consultation for potential minimum performance standards. So this will open up another discussion based on the outcomes of the report, and on the labeling scheme, we see how this can translate into minimum standards. But having said that, it's very important, and you will see that in all legislation that will come, even in the Cloud and AI Development Act that will come early next year, efficiency of data centers is very important. It's high in the requirements, even for getting access to preferential whatever permits or public funding. Energy efficiency stands in the front of the requirements, so it's very, very important. And from our side, we are also pushing for that. And I was happy to hear also that in the report it was mentioned as a high priority.
Yeah, and we see that the regulatory environment that data centers are operating in is very dynamic, and lots is happening. I would like to invite also the audience to come in with questions, and I already see a hand up. Before I then hand back the word also to our author here, Thomas Le Goff. Please come in and introduce yourself.
Belgian operator of data centers, similar to what Willem is doing, and I can confirm there are different types of data centers. There are hyperscalers, co-location, retail co-location. So I see a lot of people around in the fishbowl, and they are TSOs, but I can imagine that also data centers could run with SMRs or have their own production on site. And what is the vision about that by the DG NR and maybe also the author of this very good report? Maybe he has also a vision about that.
Thank you. Let's take two more. I saw a hand up here. Yes, please.
Hi, thanks a lot for this discussion. Ornella from Microsoft. I actually wanted to get some clarity on some of the findings that were presented as part of the study. Two in particular, one on the policy recommendations. I saw you kind of highlighted the possibility of unlocking some of those complications on reporting and regulation on this sector via the digital omnibus, and I was wondering whether there has been any taken into consideration that environmental omnibus could actually be one of the easiest channels to unlock the very lengthy permitting procedures, where industrial emission directive and environmental impact assessment directive are actually capturing data centers just because we have backup generators. But not because we are, there isn't a category specific for data centers in those. So probably the environmental omnibus could be one to consider. And the second thing, I'm an optimist and I like the 50-60% number on flexibility. I was just wondering if you could give a bit more, background on how this number was put together, particularly when we look at, data centers that host cloud solutions. Is the objective to eventually, get to regulate customers' access to their own data, or how do we get there for data centers that don't have only AI, but training on site? Thank you.
Thanks, Ornella. Anyone else who wants to come in? Yes, one hand up. This is obviously the very active part of the audience.
I was going to say something is brewing on this side of the audience. So, hi everyone, my name is Joe. I work for Siemens. So we're obviously a user of data centers, but we also provide hardware and software to grid, microgrids, and also data centers. Maybe a question and a comment around the recommendations. I think they're very interested, and I look forward to reading the actual report. But I find that there might be something missing in terms of not only expanding grid capacity, but also upgrading current grid infrastructure. And I think we talk a lot about the speed at which we need to develop this computing infrastructure. And I think, the low-hanging fruit is to make sure that the current grid is used efficiently with digitalization. And it might also be able to unlock a lot of the potential flexibility, if there is a potential there, you can't do that without data and digitalization. So maybe a question to you all is how do you see this playing in the data center space, but also in the wider grid package space? Thank you.
Thanks a lot for bringing that up, indeed. So, question about co-location with generation, role of SMRs, question about reporting and the environmental omnibus. I'm not sure we are well represented here to answer that. And the question about the upgrading of existing infrastructure. Who takes it first? You have the mic.
So I couldn't agree more with what was just said by Siemens. Yes, we must also, from our side, maximize what we have and use it to the best of its possibilities and abilities, with the usual second best solution, let's say, caveats that you have to take. Just to give you an idea, on average, we spend about 20% of what we spend today as a company on digitization. Which is a major driver. So yes, we also bank in lots of things that we do, that in the end we have the data center capacity available to run the system in a much more complicated and much more, let's say, than efficient way. So the one doesn't go without the other. Also the Commission lately mentions the NOVA principle, which does not, it only makes sense in German, I guess, but the idea is really that we enhance or we maximize the use before we build new. On the other hand, if you have greenfield developments, what can you do but build a new? So it is really, it's two sides of the same coin, but we're absolutely not blind on that eye. On the contrary, I could give you a very concrete example from northern Germany, where by moving a grid which has the perfect conditions to do that to 100% DLR, we more or less double the capacity on an existing infrastructure. But it might not work as well in Bavaria, and that's also part of the truth and the story.
From a TSO perspective, I think we all have to take into account that the electricity grid and the interconnected electricity grid in Europe is the largest man-made machine in the world. It is because we have so many data points that are connected. And now the complicated thing is that, the good thing is that we speak one language, as I said before, but the complicated thing is that we have a certain layer. Underneath that layer, there is no digitization. So you play a game without having, half of the crowd playing that game with you. So the digitization is a super important element if we really want to reap efficiencies. The second thing is, I do think, at least from a TSO point of view, because of this, critical infrastructure, we all have digital twins. We're working on the control room of the future. We are obviously, all of us here at this table are using preventive maintenance, but I think preventive maintenance is something that's 10 years old. The core of the problem is that we do not enforce the rule of we need to be digital and transparent for everybody. If we had that, we would definitely be able, and we did that analysis, vertical capacity available. If we use and we would make better use of TSOs and DSOs, we would get another 50% of the capacity. But we don't talk to each other, because that level, the DSO level, most of the DSO, and I think you concur with that, are non-digital. So that is the biggest problem we have here.
I recognize one of your recommendations, Thomas, but before I give you the final word, let's go to Mauro and Stavros.
I obviously couldn't agree more with what other TSO already say about maximizing existing assets. It's a fundamental work we already done, also in Italy, but in every European country, because it's obviously less costly and more effective than building new infrastructure. And one more point is that, so we are maybe talking about three different transition. So there is the energy transition, the clean energy transition, this is the digital transition, and the energy efficiency transition. Obviously, the goal is to trying to maintain this transition more symbiotic as possible, and obviously to do so, there is the need to cooperate obviously also with the DSOs, but with the institutions and operators. And I think is cooperation at all levels, at the European level, is probably the key to try to also go in the direction that has been mentioned.
I like this positive message of cooperation. How will you help this from the Commission side, Stavros?
So thanks a lot, Annika. First of all, on SMR, thanks for the question. If you're aware, there is the so-called SMR Alliance. They recently published a strategic action plan, I think it's called, and the first of their 10 actions is to select strategic sectors and users for facilitating the uptake of SMR technology, and I think data centers is one of them. It's a public document, so I invite you to have a look. So there is an interest from the SMR Alliance to work closer with the data centers. On the demand-side flexibility, thanks, Ornella, for the question. It's a point that comes again and again in the discussion where we bring data centers together with grid operators. The flexibility products are well defined in the energy market, but the question here is, are they fit for the business model of the data centers? Probably not all of them, and not always. And this is the discussion that we're having in this working group that we're trying to establish with the two industries to see which are the products that data centers can participate and which are the right incentives for the data centers to offer this flexibility. On the figure of 50 or 60 gigawatt, it's really impressive, and I would also, I don't know if it's in the report, the whole modeling, but I'm really curious to find more about it. Finally, on digitalization, thanks Joe for the comment. It's very important. We are indeed maybe looking at the demand of the data center. We are losing sight of the great potential of digitalization that can bring to optimizing the energy system. And thanks to Josh also for pointing out of all these technical developments that can allow us to go to flexibility models that are totally different from what we've been doing so far. So indeed, in our strategic roadmap, we will address digitalization and, more importantly, the data exchange, because all is based on data. So we will try to create this data exchange framework in Europe that energy players can collaborate, exchange data with technology companies to develop smart energy products and services. So it's our main priority. It's our aim here, and the data centers. It's a parallel discussion, but it shouldn't be the priority here. The priority is to modernize and digitalize the energy system.
Thomas, you have the last word.
Yeah, should I conclude the discussion also? Okay.
Yes, please.
So first on the questions, thank you very much for the questions. So there are some of them I won't be able to answer, and I tell you why. So on SMRs, I won't come back because you nicely explained some issues, and I think there is also a timeline issues because these are innovations that takes time first to be able to scale up and to be built, and then you have the construction time, and I think they don't really fit the timeline of development in the data center industry at the moment. So maybe in the future, but I don't think that it's I think it's a diversion to focus on that for now. There are more pressing issues, and I think also they will be reserved to the hyperscalers, the Titan project, and as we saw, there are a wide variety of data centers, and so I'm not sure that all data centers, or the majority of them, that would be a solution for them. Then regarding the unlocking the reporting burden and so on. Thank you very much for the question. And so the main thing that was addressed in the report was the overlapping requirements between the sustainability and the digital requirements. So under the NIS2, under the Cyber Resilience Act, under DORA also, and so we mapped these reporting requirements and noticed that there are numerous, and so there is room to streamline this with a single window for reporting. So we did not investigate the environment omnibus, the sustainability omnibus, but that is obviously something that should be done in further research. Thank you for the thought. We didn't investigate that in the core of the content. Regarding the figures and the flexibility, unfortunately, you don't have the right author of the report in front of you because I'm the lawyer of the team, so I didn't do the modeling. I have absolutely no capacity and no capability on that, but it is quite nice explained in the report, so I invite you to read the description of the methodology and how the figures have been reached. And yeah, so I want to come back on infrastructure because everyone answered to that. I just wanted to conclude the discussion by some thoughts. So the first one is that I think that all the discussions that just happened quite nicely connected to some of the recommendations on the need for further discussions, on the need to discuss the best options to unlock the flexibility and so on. And we see many various and diverse perspectives, and we see that the cost benefit is different depending also on the actors. And so that's where institutions come in place to arbitrate also these issues. I just also wanted to highlight two things to conclude, which are maybe the most important, because I think we should not forget why we are doing all of that. And that comes back to two remarks that have been done in the beginning of the discussion. The first one is one of the remarks from the European Commission with the need to make our startups to be able to scale up. Okay, so that's what it is about, is providing capacity for our businesses to grow and to thrive. And so I think it is a very important thing to keep in mind. And the second one I wanted to highlight also is one idea from Wissam on the role of universities. I think that's something we do not really discuss in policy spheres enough, or the links between the AI spheres, the data center operator, the policy incentives, the data center siting, and the closeness to universities also. I work in a group of engineering school, which is top level. They are all brilliant computer scientists and mathematicians. And why we regroup as engineering schools is to have access to better computing facilities. And even that, and it is one of the most elite institutions in France, my colleagues every week tell me that compared to their American colleagues or elsewhere in the world, they struggle to have access to affordable and accessible computing powers. So there is a need, there are the bottlenecks, and we are here to discuss potential solutions, but I think we need also to keep in mind the pragmatic reasons why we are doing that. Not forgetting our climate objectives and the environmental concerns, which lead me back to the question on streamlining environmental requirements. Yes, but as you saw also the reluctance from the public over environmental concerns, we should also have that in mind, not to hinder the technology adoption and social acceptance. It is something I think that will grow over time. And I think that will be my final word.
Thank you all very much. Thank you also to the audience for putting up with our innovative format here. I would like to now invite everyone to share a glass and to continue the discussion. And sorry for those online, next time join us in person. Thank you all very much.